Welcome to Shadow Shorts. This is where every weekday I bring to you a short conversation with a thought leader, a doer in the realm of innovation for the built environment. My name is Jeff Echols. I'm a senior advisor and the head of marketing for Shadow Partners. And today I am joined by Lawrence Gellerstedt. He's the managing director at Foundry Commercial in Atlanta. Even though he's wearing a Rockies hat, we've had a long conversation before we went live about baseball, which is one of my favorite topics. He's in Atlanta. He's a Braves fan. He's got a Rockies hat on. I threatened to grab mine. It's in a locker back there because we both were able to go to Rockies games in Denver this year, which I think is super cool. But Lawrence, thank you for joining me today. I'm really happy to dive into this idea of innovation in commercial brokerage. We were talking before we went live, and you mentioned that you think true ability to innovate comes from the middle, rather than boutique firms, rather than the really large firms. So let's unpack that a little bit. Why from the middle rather than one of the other extremes?
Yeah, thanks for having me on, and appreciate the understanding with the mismatched hat. I love all baseball.
Me
Braves
too.
for forever, but happy to wear all the hats. So, yeah, no. Listen, I mean, I think commercial real estate is a massive institutional business, and the services business, which I've been a part of for most of my career, is really interesting. I think it's a business that is fast moving, but really it has been in need of change for a long time. The momentum in the institutional space keeps a lot of the same players in a lot of the same spots historically, but I think we've seen challenges that we haven't seen before. There's technology we haven't seen before, interest rates being where they are, COVID changing highest and best use really quickly and broadly. It's not just spots, it's everywhere all at once. And then applications like AI and other things that are coming to change our business. I think the need for change has been there. And I think the force that is going to force us all to change and get better is there today in a way that it hasn't really been, at least in terms of my career and probably the three generations of my family that came before me that are real estate people. So I'm excited about it. I think all you can do is embrace it and ride it. I've always tried to chase it. So I was at Cushman and Wakefield for the beginning of my career, but always focused in the tech space. I was a huge believer in co-working early on. Ended up doing most of WeWork's work, all of WeWork's work here in Atlanta. WeWork hired me internally. I ran the Southeastern US for them for 2 years, did about 1.5 million square feet with them. And then I started my own boutique. I started a boutique office firm March 1st of 2020. So 2 weeks before the end of office as we knew it. And then I've spent 3 years running my own firm in the worst office environment since the inception of office. So had a lot of headwinds, a lot of force, again, to force us to do things differently and innovate and change how we were doing things on a small scale. And then again, I've experienced sort of the biggest of the bigs at Cushman. I ran our office tenant rep group there when I was there, about a 30-person team, $25 million business. I ran that. And then I've run my own small shop from zero up to $1.5 million in revenue, and then sold to Foundry Commercial in June of this year. And so having seen that landscape and in the context of innovation, I think if we back up, and I did my business school stuff here in Atlanta at Emory, if you just take some basic building blocks and say, what environments are good for innovation, what companies have the ability to pivot and move and truly bring change to industries. I think, unfortunately, and I love the brokerage business, this is not a knock, it just is the reality of how the thing is structured. Corporate strategy and the ability to move the needle at the biggest institutional firms is really challenged by two things. One, they're mostly publicly traded, which means they have to move with investor confidence. Right now, investor confidence is really low in that. And so their ability to make meaningful investment in their infrastructure is really difficult. And then the other problem you have is that you got brokers that bring in most of the revenue. Those brokers operate basically like independent businesses. And so, there's big jokes. I've taken leadership roles at Cushman. I have a leadership role here now at Foundry. And we all joke in our leadership roles here, the inmates run the asylum when it comes to brokerage firms. we just try to do a good job helping those folks with their independent businesses. But it means that we're not necessarily structured in a way that allows for quick corporate pivot, because a chief strategy officer and CEO can't come in and say, hey guys, we're going to move to this totally new thing. We're going to compensate people differently. We're going to take technology and apply it across all these business units. There's just not enough control. And so I think those two things will lead the massive sort of the big three down a path of, continuing to be successful, continuing to do good work. But it's not where the innovation will come from. They've all tried different formats. JLL has a fund. They invest in other, tech funds and in tech businesses. CB tends to buy a lot. Cushman tends to go with some sort of partnership model. They've all done a little bit of each, but they're all trying in their own way to sort of outsource innovation. And then they have a really hard time applying it across the platform. So I think for the most part, we're not going to see the innovation from that side. Having run a small boutique, I think the challenge with coming up with a startup idea and building it up from the bottom with a small boutique brokerage is really you don't have enough access to institutional players. This is a business that is run by massive, massive funds and industries. And so you have to be able to apply what you're doing to the institutional space. And then you have to have visibility and access to that space. And then you also have to have funding. And so when you're small and you're doing it, especially if you're trying to do it as a boutique brokerage, there's just not an ability to raise that kind of money, and then not an ability to get credibility with the big institutional players fast enough. If you have a good idea, you're going to get beat to market, right? If you try to do it that way. So really, that's where I sold my company to Foundry, and this is going to start to sound like a Foundry ad, but I'm going to caveat that by saying I've recently chose to sell my business to Foundry. I'm here for a reason, and I would apply what I'm about to say to Stream and Trinity and other competitors who are similar in the space. And quite frankly, I think there will be more of those over the next 5 years. So this is not just use that as an example of a mid-tier firm. But Foundry is structured in a way that we have an ownership entity and development and investment entity that sits within our business. We've done about $6 billion of ground up development over the last 6 years. That allows us to partner with the biggest institutions in real estate, Prudential, New York Life, those groups we work with, and we've done deals with, we've sold deals with too, we do services for. So that gives us a big playing field, meaningful groups that trust us to the most degree, where we're sharing an investment risk together. All the way down to, our brokers, 60% of our company is owned by the partners within the company. So we're broker run. We all have an investment in this business. We've set the business up in a way to be private for forever. We don't chase stock price, and therefore we can make meaningful investment at the right time. We will pivot because we all benefit, personally from the platform's growth. So I think what you need is the ability to have scale, to be able to build big ideas. You need patience. You need to not be, looking at public confidence in things. And so I think those are the big things that I would point to as, meaningful reasons why I think innovation will come from the middle, at least as it relates to brokerage. And then I think I think the other part of it that's meaningful is, I think that's going to be applied to a ton of different things. It's going to be AI. It's going to be a bunch of different things that come out of this. But our business needs that innovation.
Is the innovation that you see that's coming right in the brokerage world, is it going to be focused mainly on the business model, how you do business, et cetera? Or is it going to be driving, because you have a lot of influence over, we were talking before we went live, and of course you mentioned WeWork, how is office space used, repurposed, et cetera? So where do you see most innovation coming from? Is it business model or influence on product or the built environment side of it?
Yeah, so everywhere. I think, like we talked about, the force of change is going to change the highest and best use for things in a way that we never expected. I'm an office guy by trade, and looking at the different uses that are popping up now. As an office guy, I know a lot now about urban agriculture. I know a lot about data center. I know a lot about self storage. I'm learning about townhome densities. The things that I'm learning about now, I never thought I would understand, and it's stuff because the change of use is happening so quickly, and it's necessary. So I think you're going to see a lot of innovation just in terms of those very basic changes. People like to talk about things like AI, which I love to talk about too. But I think on the most basic level, we're talking about how much data center can you put in a multi-story office building? That's a super big technological innovative problem. It's probably not very complicated in terms of new tech, but was something we haven't done before or looked at before. How do you market multi-story self-storage? How do you harvest and take to market urban agriculture if you grew tomatoes on the fifth floor of an empty office building? Like, how do we get those to Amazon, right? Like that kind of stuff is new in innovation that I think is necessary. And quite frankly, those of us that are experts in real estate have no idea what that's going to look like. I mean, as we all know, we need an NOI and we need a cap rate and we need to be able to figure out how those things work. But putting a cost basis and an operating expense on somebody harvesting tomatoes and taking those down the freight elevator, we're so far away from understanding that there's a lot of room for innovation just there. Marketing, we do, probably my biggest specialty is we built my boutique business was learning how to market office space during the pandemic. We think that marketing for space, for office especially, and again, I'm a WeWork person, so I'm a little biased, is way more B2C than B2B. Historically, you've talked about we're a brokerage business. We market through the broker channel. The broker channel is the way to deals. As office gets chopped up and democratized and more close to your neighborhood, that becomes much more of a consumer-based decision, way less of an institutional real estate. Hey, I'm going to pick my 100,000 square feet and stick it in this one spot, and I'm going to decide that as a broker with my head of real estate, and we're going to do that deal, and then everybody will be forced to drive to where we tell them to drive to. That is getting chopped up in a different way, and so again, the way we market buildings starts to be, does Barbara, who runs the marketing department, who lives in Duluth in Georgia, want to have her marketing team in Duluth? And which building does she like? And which one did she see online? And which one did she think had that becomes a much more common use case. And so, we believe that digital advertising, geofencing, those types of things are massive parts of the future of marketing office. Quite frankly, if we took, and we're working on this in the background, it's not a secret. The technology and tools that are used to market apartments to individuals, we're using a lot of those same tools to take spaces within office buildings, chop it up, make it really clear, virtual walkthrough, follow up, email marketing, automated follow up. But how do you do those types of things that we've had to do for residential for forever for a use like office? So that those would be other examples of of innovation. We use AI. I say there's different brokers using it to different extents, but there's a lot of brokerage use of AI for reviewing leases, reviewing LOIs, finding risk within paragraphs. You still have to look at it. Right now, it's basically making the smartest folks smarter and quicker, but it's not removing the need for the smartest folks, at least today.
Yeah. So you were saying that, and I was thinking, as we record, the Shadow Summit wrapped up. Our 7th annual Shadow Summit wrapped up 2 weeks ago. And one of the things I did leading up to Shadow Summit was run our incubator. We had demo day at Shadow Summit. And if they're listening, there's a team that presented in demo day that's really happy to hear you talk about that, because there's different use case, but their idea, the thing that they're developing is very similar to what you just mentioned, right? It's AI review of submittals is what they're working on, but it's a very similar idea. So I think some people just clicked their heels when they heard that.
Yeah, and then we've seen it in the residential space. There's a cool group out of New York we've talked to that has a finance tool that basically allows you to get improved credit score by allowing the technology to track your banking and spending habits. And then has flipped that basically to the residential apartment world for credit checks, right, and background checks. So basically, if you have this tool, you're automatically qualified for almost every apartment in New York from a
Wow.
finance perspective, and it's improving your credit score. So background check and all that kind of stuff, because it's basically saying that credit score is one part of it, but if you've got 2 years of proving that you've paid all your bills and you get a paycheck every Friday, that should be good enough. So
Yeah.
it's really everywhere that we're seeing it. Like I said, in marketing and legal, and then it'll. I think the biggest one that people ask about is transparency, right? Is that you have
Mm.
an intermediary like us to provide transparency into an opaque market, and the more and data that's out there and available, the less and less that friction exists, and therefore brokerage fees should come down. I think there's a pretty interesting there's some pretty interesting rulings that have just come out against the National Association of Realtors that are saying they're colluding on keeping fees high. Obviously, those of us in the commercial world sort of laugh at that because I think it's missing the point a little bit. I don't think housing prices are rising because of fees. I think housing prices are rising because of the lack of availability of housing and inflation. But colluding on fees and are those people bringing the value to the buyers and sellers in those markets, and how is that working? Those are all reasonable questions where when data becomes more available, how does that impact our business? And so, I'm one of probably a few people who forever have predicted that we will end up being more like EY. We'll be consultants and we'll get paid less overall, but it'll be more fixed engagements, and we'll get paid consulting fees and salary and bonus model, and that would be much more aligned to our clients' incentives. That's how a lot of the brokerage business works in Europe.
Mm.
And in the UK, you have the tenant. In my business and office, the tenant pays the fee. And in the United States, the seller pays, right, or the landlord pays our fee, which oftentimes doesn't lead to as much transparency in the market. So, which all those things are fine; they're all the way they are, and everybody knows it's all disclosed. But I would say, transparency of data information and really the simplification of the transaction. That's where this goes. Is if office leases become WeWork deals, 1 year license agreements that are 2 pages that you don't negotiate, and that nobody's investing a ton of capital in building custom space, do you need intermediaries to run that? You don't have intermediaries for the most part. Now there are fees in the apartment world. There are fees in the hotel world, but how does that work? So anyway, all that stuff is going to be really interesting to see, and I think it ends up being the brokerage and advisory service ends up being mostly an advisory service to ownership entities who own and or operate real estate, and that is engaged on a consultancy basis that is mostly salaried and bonus. Just becomes a part of the cost structure.
Yeah. Well, and I think about this, the whole premise behind what we do at Shadow Partners and what Shadow Shorts is to talk about innovation for the built environment. And as you're describing some of these things, and whether it's tomatoes on freight elevators, et cetera, it's like this is absolutely the definition of innovation that will literally shape the built environment. So this is super interesting. I know we could unpack this for a lot longer, and but we keep it short because it's Shadow Shorts. And I think, whether you are in the brokerage world or not, I think this is a super interesting conversation as we kind of dig into innovation in brokerage, innovation in the business model, innovation in the use cases. So, Lawrence, I really appreciate you spending this time with me talking about this, and we'll talk more offline about baseball, and maybe we'll have to do this again in the future.
I'd love it. We can do it in one of the years where the Braves win the World Series. That'd be great.
Oh man, they let me down again this year.
Listen, you've been a Braves fan as long as I have. We're way used to the letdown. The letdown's easier to take these days because it happens almost every year. But at least we get
It
one
is. It's
every
expected.
decade or so.
Yeah, this is true. This is true.
Awesome. Well,
Awesome.
thank
Well,
you
thank
very
you.
much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Glad to have you here. And if you're wherever you're watching or listening to this, either live or in some time shifted manner, we appreciate you. And I'll be back again tomorrow with another